Rumblefish, Chapter 11. We went home. The motorcycle boy sat on the mattress and read a book. I sat next to him and smoked one cigarette after another. He sat there reading, and I sat there waiting. I didn't know what I was waiting for. About 3 years before, a doped up member of the Tiber Street Tigers had wandered onto Packer territory and got beat up and crawled back. I remember waiting around in a funny state of tenseness, like seeing lightning and waiting for thunder. That was the night of the last rumble, when Bill Braden died from a bashed in head. I'd been sliced up real bad by a tiger with a kitchen knife, and the motorcycle boy had sent at least 3 guys to the hospital, laughing out loud right in the middle of the whole mess of screaming, swearing, grunting, fighting people. I'd forgotten about that. Sitting there reminded me it was much harder to wait than to fight. Both home again. The old man came in the door. He liked to stop in and change his shirt before he went out to the bars for the night. It didn't matter that the one he changed into was as dirty as the one he took off. It was just something he liked to do. I want to ask you something, I said. Yes? Was is our mother nuts? The old man stopped right where he was and stared at me, amazed. I had never asked him a thing about her. No. Whatever gave you that idea? Well, she left, didn't she? He smiled slowly. Our marriage was a classic example of a preacher marrying an atheist, thinking to make a convert, instead ending up doubting his own faith. Don't give me that, I said. He was never a preacher. I was a practitioner of the law. Say yes or no, will ya? You don't suppose a woman would have to be nuts to leave me, do you? He just stood there, smiling at me, looking through me like the motorcycle boy did. It was the first time I ever saw any resemblance between them. I married her, thinking to set a precedent. She married me for fun, and when it stopped being fun, she left. And honest to God, that was the first time I came anywhere near to understanding my father. It was the first time I saw him as a person with a past that didn't have anything to do with me. You never think of parents having any kind of a past before you were there. Russell James, he went on. Every now and then a person comes along who has a different view of the world than does the usual person. Notice I said usual, not normal. That does not make him crazy. An acute perception does not make you crazy. However, sometimes it drives you crazy. Talk normal, I begged him. You know I don't understand that garbage. Your mother, he said distinctly, is not crazy. Neither, contrary to popular belief, is your brother. He is merely miscast in a play. He would have made a perfect knight in a different century, or a very good pagan prince in a time of heroes. He was born in the wrong era, on the wrong side of the river, with the ability to do anything and finding nothing he wants to do. I looked at the motorcycle boy to see what he thought. He hadn't heard a word of it. And even though I didn't have much hope that the old man could tell me something in plain English, I had to ask him something else. I think that I'm going to look just like him when I get older. What do you think? My father looked at me for a long moment, longer than he'd ever looked at me, but still, it was like he was seeing somebody else's kid, not seeing anybody that had anything to do with him. You better pray to God not. His voice was full of pity. You poor child, he said. You poor baby. The motorcycle boy broke into the pet store that night. I was with him. He didn't ask me along. I just went. Look, you need some money? I'll get you some money, I said desperately. I knew he didn't need any money. I just couldn't think of any reason for what he was doing. Anyway, I kept on talking, saying anything so I could feel the deadly silence. If you want money, liquor stores are the best bet. I stood there, zipping my jacket zipper up and down, wiping the sweat off my hands on my jeans, watching him jimmy the lock of the back door, waiting for something terrible to happen. Listen, I said again. Everybody saw you hanging around here today like you was casing the place, and a million people must have seen you coming here. Will you listen to me? My voice cracked upwards, like it had a year ago when it was changing. The motorcycle boy had the lock on the back door jimmied, and he went on in. He turned on the light in the stockroom. What are you doing? I nearly screamed. You want the whole neighborhood to know? He stood there for a second in the bright glare of the light. He looked calm, his face as still as a statue. He was seeing something I couldn't see, but my father was right. He wasn't crazy. I watched him let out all the animals. I made one move to stop him, but changed my mind, and after that, I just leaned against the counter and watched. I had to lean. My knees were shaking so bad I could barely stand up. I was more scared than I had ever been in my life. I was so scared I dropped my head down on the counter and cried for the first time I could remember. Crying hurts like hell. He let out all the animals and was on his way to the river with the Siamese fighting fish when I heard the siren. I was wiping my eyes and trying to quit shaking. I ran for the door. There seemed to be thousands of red flashing lights in the street. Doors were slamming and people were shouting. I had started for the bridge when I heard the shots. They tell me there was a warning shot. How did they expect him to hear a warning shot when everybody knew he was deaf half the time? The man who shot him knew it. I was at a dead run at the first shot and almost to the river by the second. So I was there when they turned him over and he was smiling. And the little rumblefish were flipping and dying around him, still too far from the river. I don't remember what happened just after that. The next thing I knew, I was thrown up against the police car and frisked. I stared straight ahead at the flashing light. There was something wrong with it. There was something really wrong with it. I was scared to think about what was wrong with it, but I knew anyway. It was gray. It was supposed to be flashing red and white, and it was gray. I looked all around. There wasn't any colors anywhere. Everything was black and white and gray. It was as quiet as a graveyard. I stared around wildly at the growing crowd, the police cars, wondering why it was all so silent. It didn't look quiet. It looked like TV with the sound off. Can you hear me? I shouted at the policeman next to me. He was busy with his report and didn't even look up. I couldn't hear my own voice. I tried screaming and I still couldn't hear it. I was that alone. I was in a glass bubble and everyone else was outside it, and I'd be alone like that for the rest of my life. Then a pain sliced through my head and the colors were back. The noise was deafening and I was shaking because I was still alone. Better get this kid to a hospital, I heard a policeman say. I think he's in shock or something. Shock, hell, somebody replied. I recognized the voice. Patterson. He's probably on dope or something. About that time, I slammed both fists through the police car window and slashed my wrist on the glass that was left, so they had to take me to the hospital anyway.